Hey Memorizers, Anthony Metivier here with another Magnetic Memory Mondays newsletter. And here's part of an interesting letter that I received recently. It says, Dear Dr. Metivier, I've read your book. I really enjoyed it as this is the first book that I have found that actually teaches how to put into practice the Memory Palace method with practical examples. I often dream on how better and easier my job and life would be if I had a better memory. But I think the problem is that I don't even know where or how to start. I have bought and read several books on techniques to improve memory, but most of the methods described only show how to memorize shopping lists, telephone numbers, and the like, which I admit can be very handy, but so far I have not found a method that helps me memorize concepts, theories, ideas, or, in my case, an academic paper, an economic management theory, or an insurance contract. I've tried mind maps, but without a lot of success. I have also read Moonwalk with Einstein by Joshua Foer, which I really enjoyed, but that does not provide practical advice, but rather a lot of theory and anecdotes. I'm very happy to have found your book, and I'm also excited about the possibility of having an actual coach who can give me advice and answer my questions. Well, first of all, thank you very much for your letter, and I hope this response gives you the coaching that you need. As someone who's been through graduate school myself, I can certainly understand where you're coming from, and that's really the genesis of using memorization techniques and me developing the magnetic memory method. But my first piece of advice, even though they say that advice is the worst advice, I'll give it anyway, and it's that you realize that you do have a good memory. In fact, you have a very great memory. It's just a matter of understanding some universal principles that can make it unlock that greatness that is in your mind. The other thing that I would advise is that you read each and every volume of the Magnetic Memory newsletter. There's 6 to date. There's tons of detailed information and inspiration that will help you develop your memory skills in unimaginable ways. And if you're listening to this and you have no idea what the Magnetic Memory Mondays newsletter is, just go to www.magneticmemorymethod.com and sign up for the free newsletter. There's a button at the top right corner that will take you to an opt-in form and get started. Now, when it comes to actually using memory palaces, I usually suggest that people start by picking the place they currently live to build their first one. You want to be able to mentally walk through the location, and when you're using the magnetic memory principles, it's important that you don't do this helter-skelter. You want to pick a terminal location with the building, a place that you can use as a starting point and move around on a linear journey without trapping yourself or crossing your own path. And those are very, very key points in the magnetic memory method. It's usually very easy to do because you can start in a master bedroom, for instance. They tend to be in the back corner of the house or the apartment, and you can move from there without trapping yourself or crossing your own path. The reason we follow these principles is to avoid confusing ourselves and to avoid spending mental energy on what comes next. We want to really be magnetically drawn to each piece of stored information with an absolute minimum of barriers. And if you're truly just beginning using memory palaces, try to create a journey of maybe 10 stations within the memory palace. And again, base it on your own house or wherever you live at the moment, in an apartment or even if it's a trailer. I grew up in a trailer, and no shame in that. So if you look through the newsletter, you're going to find lots of tips that I've offered about how to make stations within a memory palace so that they really work gangbusters. Volume 4 is particularly good for that. And, spend some time preparing the information you want to memorize after that you've built a memory palace or indeed a network of memory palaces, which I teach you how to do in my various materials. So much depends on how well prepared you are, and rest assured that none of the preparatory steps you'll use in the magnetic memory method are very time consuming. They're detailed. You can learn it all in 2 to 5 hours and actually build a network of memory palaces within that time as well. But it's not really so much that preparing and using memory palaces costs time or stress or failure. It's that people don't go through the steps. It all works magic once you've got the steps in order and you've understood them. And once you've got a journey prepared and you've got the material you want to memorize prepared, and you essentially know what it is in the order of importance that you want to memorize, then you are on a strong basis to begin creating vibrant, exaggerated, and action-based visualizations. Now, when it comes to memorizing concepts, I of course specialize in memorizing foreign language vocabulary, but as a graduate student and someone working towards a PhD at the time, I also developed methods for memorizing concepts in Aristotle and all kinds of crazy stuff from philosophy. I think you can use alphabetically arranged memory palaces in the way that you use the magnetic memory method for foreign language vocabulary. But when I was using memory palaces in graduate school, I would assign memory palaces on a book-by-book basis. So for example, I remember very well a palace that I created just for Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And it's great, read it. And I followed all the same basic principles I still teach to this day regarding memory palace construction, which is to say, 1, I picked a familiar place for my palace. 2, I wandered through that palace mentally in order to prepare and predetermine the journey. I was taking care to visually amplify the journey in my mind in order to make it more magnetic. And this step included making sure I didn't trap myself and never needed to cross my own path. Again, very, very important principles in the magnetic memory method. Then I created a crib, or a place to store in writing not just the target material, but the images I used to memorize the material. And, at that time I just used a pen and index cards, and I still do that for research. But for memorizing vocabulary, I always use Excel files, and that's taught in another video that you can find by looking through my channel. The next thing I did is I looked at the book and I decided in advance how many ideas I wanted to memorize. I decided that I should focus on no more than 4 key points per chapter. And this is part of the concept of predetermining. You don't want to sit with a book and decide, well, I'm going to memorize every single detail. No, the key to success is to memorize 4 or 5 key points per chapter. And decide that in advance so that when you're reading, you kind of have a border and you know that you're looking for things that really jump out at you. Doesn't mean that you dismiss all the rest, but you want to magnetize those big points. And you'll find that if you're working with this method, that the smaller details will just kind of magnetically cling to the big details by simply charging in there with this attitude of looking for, oh, I've got space for 3 concepts or 4 concepts or 5 concepts. The number is up to you. Now, having decided in advance how many ideas I want from a particular chapter, using a very quick calculation, I divided my memory palace into basic quadrants. And this is again a memory palace just for the Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle. So in essence, what I had was 4 stations per chapter in a memory palace devoted to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And as I often point out, it's really, really important to be relaxed with this. Sometimes chapters will have more than 4 points and you'll really want to include them. But again, flexibility is key always with the magnetic memory method, and you don't want to trap yourself. You don't want to create confusing journeys through your memory palace that cause you to cross your own path and so forth. So in the case of the Nicomachean Ethics, I wound up going outside and down the road to a convenience store. It was almost a kilometer away from the first station in the memory palace. But the point being is you want to make sure that each and every station, every part of your memory palace is clear in your mind. That's why we use real locations, because our minds are just filled with the natural capacity to remember places that we've lived, places that we've even visited just for a short time. We can usually recall the layout. So the next thing to do is, make sure that each and every concept you want to memorize is clear in your mind. And if it doesn't make sense, well, it's still possible to memorize the concept, but usually memorizing concepts works when you're understanding what the concept is and that it makes sense to you. But again, if a concept doesn't make sense to you, or a legal rule or whatever you might be trying to memorize, you can still memorize it. And in fact, it may come to make sense to you merely by going through the process of memorizing it. So it's a great learning strategy in general. Now, one of the things that's really, really, really important when you're memorizing material is not to judge it. Not only do you not want to judge the material you're memorizing, but you don't want to judge the images that you use to memorize the material. And one could argue that it's really easy to memorize ideas that we don't like, but I think that's really counterproductive. When we're gathering knowledge for academic purposes, it is really superior to be scientifically objective about everything. So whether you like or dislike something, and usually we memorize things that we dislike a lot better than things that we like in detail because we get sort of heated up, your mnemonic efforts will be much stronger if you take distance from it. And your mnemonic efforts are going to have all kinds of subjective images already, so you want to kind of isolate the content of what you're trying to memorize, and then use subjective things from your own life and shocking imagery to memorize the information, and sort of allow the data to be inert and benign until that you need to access it, and then you're going to use all kinds of personal stuff and crazy images and actions and all the standard mnemonic strategies that one uses to memorize stuff. And those are, incidentally, making sure that the images you use are large and colorful and vibrant and filled with action. There's really no secret to it beyond that, except that it really helps if the imagery is incongruent. And a few weeks back, I was talking in the Magnetic Memory newsletter about the memorization coaching client I had who had Godzilla kick the Statue of Liberty in the rump. And, Statue of Liberty dropped her torch and had to pick it up. That's a really great, powerful, strong image. But the thing about that image is it's congruous, which means to say that it makes sense. Okay, obviously it doesn't make sense at one level that Godzilla is kicking the Statue of Liberty, because that's fantasy. But what I mean by congruous is that it makes sense that if the Statue of Liberty it drops her torch and has to bend over to pick it up, well, that's sort of logical. But if Godzilla kicked the Statue of Liberty and she had to pick up an Uzi made from the legs of a crab, well, that's strange, bizarre, and it's easy to see in exaggerated colors. And, sometimes people ask me, isn't that going to confuse me, or isn't it even going to be hard to remember these strange details? And the fact is, no. I mean, probably if you get an image in your mind right now of the Statue of Liberty picking up an Uzi made out of the legs of a crab, and you exaggerate the colors, close your eyes, see it really bright, vibrant, large, full of action, that's going to stick in your mind. It's just crazy. But it's not going to stick in your mind as much if she's just dropped her torch and picks it back up. That's congruous. But incongruous is something that's completely, illogical, like Uzis made out of legs of crabs and so on. So we really want to include incongruity in our mnemonic efforts. Now, another thing is to make sure that you're not engaged in rote learning. And rote learning, of course, is repetitively looking at a piece of material, such as with an index card or so on, and then repeating it, and then looking away from the index card, and then seeing if you can repeat it, and then looking back at the index card. It's really, really tiring stuff. So how do you avoid rote learning? Well, you want to get out a sheet of blank paper and quickly jot out what you've memorized. And it doesn't have to be in paragraphs or anything like that. Point form will do. But you want to do this in such a way that it is away from the material that you've actually memorized. So if it were a book or something like that, you want to have this piece of paper somewhere where you can't actually refer to the memorized material. This prevents you from cheating. It prevents you from looking back and forth to see if you've memorized it correctly. What it does is it makes sure that you're actually using your mind and you're using the mnemonics that you spent some time with creating so that you can recall this stuff. And that's going to strengthen your memorization abilities, and it's going to deepen your knowledge and understanding of the material. And it really doesn't matter if you make a mistake. It doesn't matter if you get it 100%, because when you do go back and review what you've done, you compare this piece of paper where you've written out what that you've memorized, and you go back and you see, well, that wasn't quite right. You can examine the material, the associative imagery that you've created, and go back and correct it a little bit, strengthen it. And I talk about that. It's the principle of compounding, it's called. And you can learn about that in the Magnetic Memory newsletter or in one of my books or my video course and so forth. That's memorizing concepts in a nutshell, going through it really fast, but hopefully you'll find all this helpful. I haven't really gotten too much into the detail of how memorizing various concepts works, but somehow I don't think that telling you why John Gacy breaking into a telephone booth to steal pancakes from Frosty the Snowman reminds me of the 3 tiers of friendship in Aristotle is really going to help you in a practical level. That's one of the paradoxes of teaching the magnetic memory method and mnemonics in general. We all need to make our own associations, and we need to practice doing it. We can hear what other people have done with their mnemonic strategies and just be like, wow, that's so bizarre. I don't even know how that could work for another person. So you got to get into it and practice it on your own, and you will see how it works. This is scientifically proven stuff. There's, it's on TED Talks and so forth, so it must be true. But, you don't have to take my word for it. Mnemonics have been around for 2,000 years. People can use it to memorize the entire Odyssey or the Iliad or whatever you want. So get in there and try it. That's the whole point. And you've already got a magnetic memory series book, so you are well on your way. And, if I could do it all over again, I would still use one memory palace per book when it came to memorizing concepts. But the next time around, I would have those books organized alphabetically in my mind as I teach in the magnetic memory method for memorizing foreign language vocabulary. There is extreme power in organization. I'm a kid from the library generation back when we had the Dewey Decimal, and, he was the coolest worm on the block. So maybe I'm just nostalgic for organizing things alphabetically, but it really works, and I think our minds are designed to respond very easily to things of that nature. Now, if you've been watching this and you've been enjoying this, and I really want to thank you for watching this video, and if you're interested in learning foreign language vocabulary and memorizing that vocabulary so you can recall it with ease, I hope you're ready to leap forward and get really serious about building a successful memorization system for yourself so that you can really learn a new language and recall its vocabulary with ease, or in fact anything that you want to memorize and recall. And here's what you can do right now. Over the years, I've developed a complete, practical, and language learning oriented memorization program containing great ideas, and you can use these immediately to improve your vocabulary memorization skills and speak more fluently as a result. In my full home study program, which I call How to Learn and Memorize the Vocabulary of Any Language You Want Using the Magnetic Memory Method, you get more than 4 solid hours of video training and 400 pages of ideas and concepts and real actionable strategies that you can use right now to increase your vocabulary learning efforts and boost your fluency. In this course, you learn the best ways to build memory palaces for learning and memorizing foreign language vocabulary using a very simple 3-step formula. And you'll learn a simple method for memorizing the genders and the cases of different words. You'll learn the most important words to focus on so that your boosts in vocabulary are meaningful and instantly useful in conversations. You'll learn how to systematically divide words into component parts so that you'll not only know what each word means after you've learned it, but ultimately be able to guess what new words probably mean, even if you haven't heard them before. And that's a really, really interesting thing that happens when you get enough vocabulary in your head while studying a foreign language. You'll also learn how to put together a knockout vocabulary memorization schedule that will give you dozens of new words every time you practice using the magnetic memory method. And above all, you'll learn how to make memorizing foreign language vocabulary automatic, thrilling, and fun. And there's so much more to share in this course. So please visit my course by following the link below today. Watch the promo video and the free lesson it contains, join the course, and start benefiting right away. Now, I personally guarantee that you'll be delighted with this program and that it will help you memorize dozens of words every time you study. You can try it for an entire 30 days, and if you're not satisfied for any reason, I really insist that you send it back to me for a full refund. The magnetic memory method has been used by thousands of language learners, many of whom previously considered themselves the owners of a bad memory, and these people have made real strides in acquiring new languages based on the advanced memorization skills they learned from my method, and as a consequence of using the magnetic memory method, they've found themselves memorizing just about anything that they could possibly want. And remember, anything someone else has done can be done by you as well, as long as you learn how. So this program, How to Learn and Memorize the Vocabulary of Any Language You Want Using the Magnetic Memory Method, will give you a series of step-by-step formulas to build a successful network of memory palaces that will allow you to memorize and recall foreign language vocabulary at will. Join the course today. Thank you very much.